Let's beat the waiver wire for championship week 17 right now on FFT Express. Okay, Jamey, let's talk about it. We got some quarterbacks to pick up. Who are the names to know?
I think the best one is Tyler Shuck. Coming off another strong game. He was a little overshadowed by Taysom Hill, but still did well against the Jets, and now a great matchup against the Titans. So he's a borderline top 12 quarterback for me, and somebody I'll be looking at to start over Jared Goff, for example, because I'm terrified of Goff taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Mariota, if he plays, has a great matchup against the Cowboys. As we know, only two quarterbacks this season have failed to go over 20 fantasy points against Dallas, but Mariota dealing with that hand injury, so something to keep an eye on there. After those two, it's kind of a mix of, I haven't really settled on the order yet. We'll get that by Tuesday, but you have Aaron Rodgers. We'll find out if DK Metcalf's going to play, taking on the Browns. You got Cousins in what is a matchup that they're probably going to be chasing points against the Rams. They're home on Monday night. Bryce Young against a depleted Seattle defense. Probably going to have to throw in that game, especially if the Seahawks limit the run game for the Panthers. And then Cam Ward, give him credit. He's been playing much better of late, certainly from a fantasy perspective, and he has a great matchup against the Saints. So all those quarterbacks could be replacement options, but my favorite is Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Ward, I don't think people are going to really trust him, but he's thrown one pick in his last 8 games, and it's killing these DSTs that we keep streaming against the Titans. So just keep that in mind if you have the Saints DST, who certainly came through last week. Okay, running back is really interesting, Jamey. Ramondre Stevenson is someone that may have been dropped, so he could have a great opportunity against the Jets. Who else?
So I would go back to Michael Carter. Did well in the loss against the Falcons, but I think will be a little bit more in the passing game. At least that would be the hope, taking on the Bengals. Emmanuel Wilson may be the starter for the Packers. So if we find out before Tuesday that Jacobs potentially is ruled out, he would be number 1. So those are the top 2 guys. Both could be considered starting options. Then we get into the flex range of guys that you got to keep an eye on some injury situations. At least we know with the Browns that there's not going to be Quinshon Judkins with his unfortunate injury. But I would actually look at the Texans first with Woody Marks being out, because Jawar Jordan got 20 total touches. Not going to be an easy matchup against the Chargers, but anytime you're talking about a running back that getting that much work, he should be in the flex conversation, especially in PPR when Jordan had 5 catches. So when you look at the Browns, Raheem Sanders is probably going to be the lead running back unless Dylan Sampson's active, but I think we'll still see a split. So Sampson's missed the Week 16 game. We'll see what happens with him coming back against Pittsburgh. And give the Steelers credit. They shut down the Lions rushing attack almost completely. So the role in the passing game may be the thing that matters here. So Sampson could be clearly very popular. But if Sampson's out, don't forget about Travion Williams, who had 4 catches in that game for the Browns after Judkins left. We go to Washington next, where Chris Rodriguez scored a touchdown, keeping on Quinnen Williams in that situation there for Dallas. And then we get into really some desperation plays in my mind, but some guys that could be flex options for you. So Tyjae Spears coming off a game where he did very well for the Titans. I think we'll see both running backs still involved. Pollard, obviously, the better of the two. Isaiah Pacheco, extremely involved in the passing game, and given the quarterback situation and potentially the receiver situation for the Chiefs, we could see Pacheco having to catch some passes against the Broncos, especially to avoid the pass rush. I'll go back to Audric Estime, clearly with not as much confidence because of what Taysom Hill did for the Saints, but Estime played more than Evan Hull, and so maybe they give him an opportunity against the Titans to carry the ball a little bit more. Sean Tucker scored a touchdown now in 3 straight games, so if you are desperate, maybe he scores for a 4th game in a row in a very good matchup against Miami. And then the really, really desperate guys, Samaje Perine and Isaiah Davis, they're getting work in their respective backfields. Perine scored a touchdown against the Dolphins. Davis had 4 catches for the Jets. Both guys, if you're really stuck, could be flex options if you really need them in the championship week.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We've got wide receivers, tight ends, DSTs, and even some kickers for you on Beat the Waiver Wire. We'll be right back. All right, so the wide receiver, I think maybe not quite as good, but the wide receiver equivalent of Ramondre Stevenson would be Troy Franklin. He was
100%.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you were going to pick one, you'd pick Ramondre, but both of them have opportunities here. And we don't know that Travion Henderson isn't going to play. It'd be shocking if Pat Bryant played on Thursday. But anyway, who are the available wide receivers to get?
And also keep an eye on the Packers situation. Romeo Doubs left the game with a wrist injury. Maybe Jaden Reed gets a boost in that regard. So he's another guy in the shallow league, 71% rostered. But Parker Washington coming off an amazing game for the Jaguars. Clearly, we've seen an up-and-down season for Brian Thomas. I think he'll be better against the Colts in Week 17. But Washington could be a starter in 3 receiver leagues. Mac Hollins could be somebody that the Patriots need and maybe fantasy managers need as well. Keyshawn Boutte left with a head injury. Demario Douglas left with a hamstring injury. And so Hollins, in the 2 games that Boutte was out, was very involved for Drake May, excuse me. And so Hollins could be an option in 3 receiver leagues. All these guys are 3 receiver league are only worth using in 3 receiver leagues. You wouldn't start these guys in 2 receiver leagues unless you're really stuck. Jamey DK had another touchdown, taking on the Saints. Could be involved again from Cam Ward, as you alluded to, playing well. I would look at Jalen Coker again. I know he didn't have a great game against the Bucs, but we expect them to potentially be throwing more against Seattle, and against Seattle dealing with a lot of injuries on defense, in their secondary, but on defense as a whole. And then Trey Tucker was very involved against the Texans and taking on the Giants at home. I think Tucker's worth a look in deeper leagues. We know he's been very tough to trust, but I still think with Tyler Lockett also banged up, that could be somebody that benefits in that great matchup against the Giants.
Yeah, by the way, Matt Collins, 2 games without Kayshon Boutte, 16.6 fantasy points at Tampa Bay, 10.4 against the Jets, and he ran 84% of the routes in weeks 10 and 11. All right, tight ends.
I'm going to go back to Brent Strange. I know he didn't play well against the Colts the first time around, but scored a touchdown against the Broncos. I think just the way Trevor Lawrence is playing right now, you take your chances with Strange as a low-end starter. The next 2 guys are really more deep league options. But look, if they're going to feature Taysom Hill like they did in the first game without Kamara, Kendre Miller, and Devin Neal, maybe it's just him as the running back of choice and giving him these opportunities, which what sounds like his last couple of games with the Saints, maybe his last couple of games in the NFL. And then Mike Gesicki scored a touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games. You're just attaching yourself to Joe Burrow. I know it's tough to trust Gesicki when everybody's healthy, but we did see him score against Miami. The Cardinals, who they face in Week 17, have been miserable against tight ends for the majority of the season. So Gesicki is somebody in deeper leagues that you could look at.
DSTs.
I'm sorry, before we get there, the shallow league guys at tight end, because these guys may have been dropped.
Yeah.
Hunter Henry, touchdown 2 of his last 3 games. Great matchup against the Jets. Dalton Schultz has just been amazing for the majority of the second half of the season, coming off another good game against the Raiders, which we know have been good against tight ends, but Schultz just locked in right now. So I think you can still start him against the Chargers. And then Juwan Johnson is the best of the bunch, looking at what he did in the first game without Devon Vele. Great matchup against the Titans. You'll be starting Juwan Johnson as a potential top 6 tight end this week.
Wow. Okay. And yeah, Hunter Henry has been really consistent. And just a few weeks ago, he had a good game against the Giants. It was almost a great game, if you recall. He had a touchdown called back on something like an illegal shift or something like that. But when he hasn't faced Buffalo, basically, Hunter Henry's been pretty reliable. Okay, Jamey, what do we got for DSTs?
Giants had a good game against the Vikings and taking on the Raiders, who I know look better offensively against the Texans, but it's still Geno Smith. And so maybe we get a few pressures and some sacks and maybe a turnover to there. Vikings defense has been awesome. I know they're taking on the Lions, but still trust Brian Flores. The Ravens could be facing Malik Willis. You brought up, we may have had this conversation already before, but the Bucs defense against Quinn Ewers, that could be an option to take a look at there. And then depending on what the Commanders quarterback situation looks like, you could check out the Cowboys. For kickers, Evan McPherson's just been very good. Takes on the Cardinals. They're one of the best teams in terms of allowing fantasy points to kickers. Eddie Piñeiro's just been solid. We'll see what he does Monday night, but taking on the Bears. In that same game, Cairo Santos taking on the 49ers, so another option to consider as well.
Thank you, Jamey. Thank you all for watching and listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football.